Ukrainian troops have destroyed yet another North Korean M1978 Koksan self-propelled gun, SPG, in eastern Ukraine. In a post made on Telegram app on Tuesday, Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Force reported that soldiers from the 413th Raid Battalion detected and disabled the long-range SPG in eastern Donetsk region. The report also includes the video that shows the moment of the strike at Koksan. Due to a shortage of barrel artillery, Russia has increasingly relied on SPGs such as the Koksan, which were supplied by North Korea, the report says. Last week, the 14th Separate Regiment of Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Forces struck Korean Koksan with the use of HIMARS in Russia's Kursk region. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukraine has destroyed than 25,000 Russian artillery systems.
Arrogance and systematic underestimation of the enemy is a constant shortcoming of the Russian military machine and Russia as a whole. This explains why, despite having significantly more resources and equipment, Russia has not been able to destroy Ukraine. Military analyst and former Pentagon consultant Ruben Johnson illustrates this Russian feature in an article for 1945 using the example of the use of guided air bombs, GAB. Their appearance became a big problem for the Ukrainian armed forces, but over time these weapons were made ineffective. Russian fighter bombers dropped guided bombs daily on both the forward positions of the defense forces at the front and on the front line regional centers of Kharkiv and Zaporozhye. The peak of these strikes occurred in September last year, when Russian aircraft dropped more than 900 guided bombs in 1 week. As Johnson notes, thanks to a modern electronic guidance and course correction system, such bombs could accurately hit their intended targets, and a large explosive charge led to devastating consequences at the point of impact. This gave the Russians the opportunity to burn the Ukrainian rear and break the path of infantry on the front lines, the analyst writes. However, over time, the Ukrainians were able to create an electronic warfare system that made Russian guided aerial bombs extremely inaccurate and therefore ineffective despite their high power. The system called LIMA is a combination of simple signal jamming, coordinate substitution and an information cyber attack on the navigation receiver of the guided bomb's guidance system. After the deployment of the electronic warfare system, the bombing accuracy first began to decrease, and then, realizing the ineffectiveness of this method of destruction and the impossibility of achieving the set goal, the enemy stopped bombing rear facilities altogether, the system's manufacturer explained. At that time, the Russians concentrated on bombing the advanced positions of the Ukrainian armed forces at the front, but at a certain point the Ukrainians managed to build an electronic wall on the front line, which neutralized the cabs. Instead of hitting the strongholds of the defense forces, the Russian bombs flew wherever they could, sometimes hitting the positions of Russian troops, Johnson writes. One of Russia's weaknesses that never goes away is that they seem to think they are still in Syria or Chechnya or some African country, somewhere where the enemy has no technical skills and no ability to fight back within the electromagnetic spectrum. It is their arrogance and their inability to adapt to the battlefield as quickly as we do that allows us to beat them every time. A representative of a Ukrainian company that produces electronic warfare systems told the author of the article. A Russian attack on Lithuania is possible this autumn. This was stated by military expert, historian and professor at the University of Potsdam, Sönke Neitzel, in an interview with the German publication Bild. He explained his concerns by saying that the security situation in the world has changed because of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and the policies of US President Donald Trump. We see that Russia has announced large-scale exercises in Belarus. We see a strong fear in the Baltic states that during these exercises, Russian troops may cross the border. And we see that perhaps NATO's Article 5, at least for the US, may cease to apply. Deterrence is weakening, the historian noted. He named several factors that will determine whether there will be a war in Europe, in particular, how NATO reacts in general, what role Trump plays, what role the Europeans play, whether peace in Ukraine will be achieved in any form. In his opinion, Putin will not attack other European countries while he is fighting in Ukraine. At the same time, Nytimes said that Germany is not ready for such a development, but it is not only about money, but also about army reform. He noted that reforms were carried out, but they ended up in a dead end, so the next chancellor must seriously take up the reform of the armed forces. Because the reform of the Bundeswehr was not a project of the entire cabinet, but only a project of individual ministers who did not dare to turn the Bundeswehr upside down. The Chancellor, if Merz becomes the Chancellor, must say that this is our government project, this is our priority now. The Minister of Transport, the Minister of Labour, the Minister of Construction must also participate in this. After all, the Bundeswehr is an integral part of the infrastructure, the professor emphasized. He says the biggest problem is ammunition. Since 1990, he says they have bought enough for exercises, but not for war. Even during the Cold War, ammunition was the weak point. There was enough fuel, there were enough soldiers, mobilization plans were ready, but most often there was only ammunition for 7 to 10 days. The historian added that he would also include attack drones, which are also in short supply in the category of ammunition. Intelligence will also be a problem. Nytimes said, if the US stops providing intelligence support, we have too few satellites. We also need more powerful air defense. How to protect ourselves from missiles, helicopters, airplanes, the expert emphasized. He also expressed hope that the Europeans would cope if the US did not come to the rescue in the event of war, although before that, the Europeans had always hoped for the Americans. Remember the war in Kosovo? 75% of the airstrikes were carried out by the US. In Iraq and Afghanistan, the Europeans were, strictly speaking, only auxiliary troops, and when the US left, the Europeans left too. Although we have 500 million citizens in the EU, we were always in the shadow of the US, Nytimes emphasized. At the same time, Nytimes says that democracies are capable of much because other strong countries remain in NATO. Canada remains in the alliance. There are encouraging signs from Paris, London and now Berlin that perhaps we Europeans will finally learn to walk on our own.